Hello and welcome to the Patreon channel of True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. We are now at episode 38 in the ongoing series, hashtag 2 years ago today CW, and as you probably are experiencing, the momentum is picking up with every successive episode, which is why every successive episode is around about 90 minutes, 100 minutes. There's a lot to get through. August 7th presents the return to Colorado for the little girls, for Chris Watts, and kind of the temporary return of Shanann herself. And we're going to spend some time again just going through the phone data review, going through the discovery, and drawing a couple of inferences along the way. Before we get to that, I feel like there's some important true crime rocket science specific work that we need to do, work that has sort of been left over from yesterday. Now, you may remember that we spoke about that note. So that's the first thing that I want to deal with. I want to deal with the note on its own, and I also want to deal with it.
Are you familiar with the study of graphology?
I've never given it any serious thought, no.
The psychological analysis of handwriting.
I also want to deal with it in terms of handwriting analysis. That is something that I dealt with quite meticulously in the book Silver Fox, The Third Confession. In that book, we had the benefit of what's not actually verbalizing or emailing or typing out his statement. He actually hand wrote it. And what I think a lot of criminals don't realize when they do that is they're giving away a heck of a lot about themselves that they wouldn't otherwise do, in so many different ways. Your handwriting expresses your mood, the type of person you are, your approach to some extent right and wrong. For example, how often do you cross things out? How do you cross them out? How meticulous are you? How detail orientated are you? There's even a degree of premeditation in writing, in handwriting, where does your handwriting sort of what's the word? Does it terminate? How close to the end of the right hand margin does it terminate? And you even get that in an even better way in the cards that Chris Watts wrote, where he fits, because there are no lines on those cards, where he fits what he's trying to say very carefully and very cleverly in the canvas of those cards. You may have experienced when you're trying to write something, especially if it's more than one or two sentences, that you might run out of space, or that you've got to squeeze something in, and when that happens, it shows maybe you had a bit of a lack of planning there. And you can see that Chris Watts doesn't. He's quite a he's a planner. He's a thoughtful, internalized person. When I say thoughtful, I mean he thinks a lot. I don't mean that he's necessarily generally thoughtful. I do think that in this case the murders were thought out. Now, for those that are listening to the podcast, you're not going to be able to see this. I'll probably put it in the post nevertheless. You can actually compare the handwriting of this note on the 6th of the 8th, that's yesterday, 2 years ago today. Watts wrote this at his parents' home when he went there. I don't doubt that. Even though the district attorney, it seemed like news to him, even though it was something that even Detective Baumhover didn't seem to know about, I believe that this note is legitimate. What I mean by that is I believe it was written by Chris Watts because the handwriting appears to be a match. Now, I can go into a lot of detail about that. I don't really think it's necessary, just because you can kind of see the size of the handwriting is similar. The handwriting in this note and the letters to Cheryl and Cadel is slightly different, because I think the letter he wrote to her, he had more time. Bear in mind he's in jail, is serving out a life sentence. He's got the whole day to write the note. Also, he's probably written practice notes, as in written a note, okay, he's made a mistake there, and then he rewrites it. So he's had a lot of time to get his little story straight. In terms of this note, I think he didn't have that much time. Another aspect that I want to sort of just mention is, if he did write the note, which as I said, I think he did, why did he write it? Was it his idea? I'm speculating now, and it's not something I like to do too much, but I think if you compare what Nicole Cashin just said to him after the family disappeared, we're jumping a little bit ahead in time, but what she said to him was something about, I think he said, I can't remember who said it, but someone said, should you park your car in front of the house? Maybe, I think it was he said it. He wasn't going to park his car in front of the house because she might be afraid to come home. And that's, interestingly enough, the subject matter of today's episode, that Shanann actually felt afraid to go home on the 7th. I'm talking about afraid to go home to Colorado with Watts. She says that. So we're going to deal with that. But in any event, in the story, on the 13th, there was this idea, well, couldn't she maybe be afraid to come home if you're there? So it was, I think someone suggested that there were two suggestions. The one is to park his car further down the road, but the other one was to record her when she came in. I think that was Kessinger's suggestion, that if Shanann arrives home, record what she says. Now, that same, not premeditation, but that same kind of being forearmed, preparing for something in case it happens. You have that same kind of psychology in this note, where a lot of shit is happening, there's a lot of drama, we know it was going on, there's a lot of resentment and upset and bitterness and grudges and this and that, and what's under those circumstances in that situation writes this note saying, if something happens to me, look at my wife. If something happens to the children, look at my wife. Now bear in mind, on the one hand, he's deliberately, seditiously poisoning her to bring about a miscarriage, and now he's about to head back to to Colorado with her, with his family, and he is going to try to bring about another miscarriage with another poisoning attempt. But there's also the fear of, legitimately I think, of something happening, that there might be a Nico gate, there might be some kind of thing. And I think what he is trying to suggest here is that Shanann's so upset that she might hurt herself or the children or something. I'm not saying that she would have. I'm not saying that's on the cards. I'm saying that he's making that suggestion here. In other words, he's setting her up. And the third dimension to this is that doll that is wrapped in the plastic. I think he does that to put it onto her phone. He gets rid of it on his own phone, and then, but he didn't expect her to put it on Instagram. And we're going to deal with that as we get to it on the timeline. Again, everything I've said is speculation. I can't prove it. It's simply a hypothesis, and it doesn't actually implicate anybody else. Whether it was somebody else's idea that he wrote this note doesn't mean they were trying to set Shanann up. Chris Watts was trying to set Shanann up. Do you get what I'm saying? They may have felt something is about to happen here and be careful, but Chris Watts has already got a criminal psychology in his mind. These other people don't. I think that's quite important to bear in mind. The other thing that is sort of the true crime rocket science thing that I want to almost kind of hypnotize you with, but obviously you know how hypnosis works. I've got to have your permission. So I'm telling you that I want to hypnotize you, but when I tell you what it's about, I'm sure you can decide how you feel about it. Basically, what I want to simply get you to remember, that's what the hypnosis is about, is recall. I simply want you to remember this date, August 6th, because I think a lot of people, even 2 years later, you remember certain things, they stick in your mind, you don't remember other things, and that also distorts reality. And we want to have an authentic narrative for the Chris Watts case. And this is a really important date, August 6th. It's the day that Watts for the first time tells Shanann, I don't want the baby. And from there flows a lot of other things. I think she suspects he's having an affair. She's waiting for him to say it. Because he doesn't say it, I think she thinks maybe there's a thread of hope. But also, by the same token, because he doesn't say it, he kind of feels like the power shifted to him. She's now hanging on a thread, the thread that he's holding, if that makes sense. And we're going to see how that plays out over the next few days. The reason that August 6th is so important is it's the first time Watts sort of does what he's kind of supposed to do. He's supposed to start separating from Shanann. He's supposed to get divorced. He's supposed to be he's supposed to sort of report back to Kissinger, yes, we spoke and this is the situation now, and this is what's going to change. Personally, I don't think Kissinger was aware of the pregnancy. I know it's a big bugbear. A lot of you are absolutely determined that you had to have known, but I've got a feeling that either she didn't know about it or she knew about it and was misled, like that it was somebody else's child. I just don't imagine that she would have gotten involved with a guy whose wife was pregnant and everybody knew it. I just don't have that sort of feeling. And so the thing is, the reason why this August 6th is so important is he tells Shanann the truth about something for the first time. And then from there, Shanann realizes he's having an affair. And then I think there's like a power shift. She realizes, oh shit, she's in serious trouble now. She needs to stay married to this guy. She's pregnant. She doesn't have money. She's in a desperate situation. She's got to make this work. And she thinks she can. She's controlled Chris Watts before. She's just nice to him. He'll come around. Even if he is having an affair, she has to make this work. And hence the decision to have a romantic weekend in Aspen, which they never have. She doesn't, although maybe she suspects an affair, maybe she thinks he's ambivalent, maybe she thinks she can just, I don't know, get him back or something like that. She doesn't realize that by the time he tells her he doesn't want the baby, well, he's already resolved that long ago. He's already tried to get rid of the baby. So she doesn't realize how far gone he is. And you're going to see how over the next few days, Shanann is hoping that she can win him back or whatever. She doesn't realize that she's lost that race a long time ago. And then it's the question of how do you change someone's mind? Someone has changed their mind about you. How do you get them to do what you want them to do? It's like this thing of how do you control someone? How do you force them to do what you need them to do? Do you ask them nicely, or do you coerce them? Or do you use all the things that you can? And we're just going to sort of look at that. The reason why I want you to remember August 6th is because it's the beginning of that process. And how I want you to remember it is quite simple. August 6th is quite a memorable day in history anyway. It was something a patron on Patreon told me, just said that, did you know that the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was dropped on August 6th? And the name of that bomb was called Little Boy. And this bomb that was dropped on Shanann was, I don't want our little boy. I don't want our child. I don't think he knew at that point that it was a little boy, but it was a little boy, and the bomb that was dropped on Shanann was that he didn't want this little boy. And it was a bomb that would devastate this family, ultimately. That little piece of information was almost like the atom that split and then everything ultimately blew up. slowly in this case. It took about a week, but that's ultimately what happened. That's not to say that the bomb hadn't been put together, the pieces of it had been put together over the week preceding and the weeks preceding. The affair, the distance, when I say distancing, I mean the sort of standoffishness, the coldness, the bickering, the nutgate, all of that played into building this bomb. But the bomb was basically there, and now it was like rigged to blow, but it didn't blow. And that's why I said, why was there no Nico Gate? And I think there was no Nico Gate because Shanann realized, I'm in serious trouble here. I need Chris Watts to stick with it. I'm pregnant. I'm in a bit of a dangerous situation. The other thing that's probably just interesting to know is August 6th is also the day of John Benet Ramsey's birthday. There's another child who should have, reached 7 years of age, and she would have been 30 this year, and she never did. So she also died prematurely. She didn't get to, live out her life, just like baby Nico never got to be born into the world. Just like the Watts children didn't get to grow up themselves. I mean, they were even younger than John Benet. But all of these dates are for August 6th, Hiroshima, John Benet Ramsey, and August 6th is the day, 2 years ago today, that Watts dropped this bomb. And all he said was, I don't want to have this baby. He said it. For him, that was a huge step. And through that, Shanann guessed everything else almost immediately. If you go through the phone data review, if you listen to that full episode yesterday, I explained to you just how quickly, just from that one little bit of truth that he told her, she immediately realized exactly what was going on. She even did her own phone data review herself. She realized, wow, for the past 5 weeks, she'd been going to bed at 7 o'clock every night. She was on to him immediately. He wasn't going to bed at 7 o'clock. He was going to Kessinger at 7 o'clock. He was at Kessinger's house 7 or 8 o'clock every night, having sex with her every night, sleeping there every night in July. And she caught on to that virtually immediately. He'd been saying, we've got a problem with the lack of communication. She was like, no, well, I kind of went along with that, or I maybe was fooled by that, but I'm not fooled by that now. The problem here isn't a lack of communication. Watts was kind of using that as well to his benefit, this lack of communication. Playing with the ambiguity, for example, using Nutgate as a cover for what was really going on, what was really upsetting him, what was really the issue. Okay, so now we are 18 minutes in. I think it's time to sort of start with today's episode. We are at August 7th, 2018, and the title that I put on Crime Rocket 2 was Scared to Death. I really don't want to leave here. Just think of those words. Just think how portentous they are. Scared to death. Shanann was absolutely justified in being scared to death. Suddenly her husband had dropped this bomb on her. Suddenly she realized what was really going on. Not only about Nico, but about everything else. She was absolutely spot on in being scared to death, in being afraid. She's absolutely right. And she was also absolutely right in not wanting to leave here. If she had stayed, if she'd listened to her heart, listened to her gut, she would have stayed and she would have lived, and so would the children have. And this is in the criminal sense, I guess the genius of Chris Watts, that he left this all to the last moment. Can you imagine if it said this to Shanann earlier on and somehow her family had found out and they'd said, don't go back, just stay here, leave him, whatever. And she probably would have had more time to sort it out. But I think because there was a rush, it was sort of almost a mixture of denial and a mixture of wait and see, and a mixture of not really having time to deal with it, because they tended to argue anyway at night. They tend to deal with it when the kids were asleep and so on. So I'm not saying Chris Watts wanted to murder his family. In other words, he wanted her to go home with the children. I think he would have preferred it if she didn't. I'm simply saying if he told her earlier, she probably would have decided that she's not going to go home. It's possible that her family may have also spoken to her and said, sure, wow, this is you need our support, stay with us. Bear in mind, they'd lived with her for 15 months. Now she could stay with them for some time. I'm sure that would have been okay with them. Just think about that. That could have been a simple thing that could have pleased everybody. Not an ideal situation, but that would have, I guess, perpetuated the separation. Just think about it. She stays there, the kids stay there, Watts goes back home, and that 5.5 week period or 6 weeks where he was away from Shanann now continues. He goes home, goes back to Kessinger. Yes, we are separated, and by the time he sees Shanann again, they can actually maybe start getting divorced. Who knows what the financial crater will be at the end of that, but that's certainly probably a part that Watts was very concerned about. Bear in mind now that every day we go through now will be the last day of that week that the children or Shanann ever experience. So this will be the last Tuesday in their lives. The next day will be the last Wednesday that they'll ever experience. Last time. Hey guys, I hope you've enjoyed that 20-minute preview. The episode continues for about another hour on Patreon on the $1 tier. So you can go there if you'd like to listen to the rest of the episode. The link is in the description. For those of you who'd prefer just to sort of read the full True Crime Rocket Science analysis in one go, you're welcome to read the I think it's the 5th narrative in the series, Two-Face Drilling Through Discovery. That narrative deals with this phone data review in detail, and that is a really good narrative to get all of this distilled data kind of in one place. So that's available on Amazon. It's also one of the best reviewed books in the series. So there are a lot of links to all sorts of things, news and so on. It's an interactive book on Kindle, so check it out. In terms of John Benet Ramsey, I'll probably be doing a video over the weekend just dealing with this myth that there's a DNA belonging to some kind of entity, perhaps some kind of intruder. I don't know what their story is, but just to debunk that story. That's something else I did on Patreon, but I sort of feel like I want to do it briefly on YouTube as well. I'll also be putting on a 2-part additional analysis on Laurie Vallow, dealing with the exhuming of the bodies. So I'll do the Agent Daniels's testimony from the previous preliminary hearing. I'll do that on YouTube, and I'll do the part 2, which is the exhuming of Tylee. That'll be available on Patreon. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do like, share, leave a comment. If you want to head on to Patreon, there are over 890 posts that you can get access to. So even if you're interested in this series, there's a heck of a lot of value beyond that. But other than that, I hope you are safe and well. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.